The traditional funnel, if you will, is not fit for purpose with the reality of how today's consumer is. And so, today's consumer is searching, they're streaming, they're scrolling, they're shopping. Sometimes they're doing two, three, or four of those at the same time. And so really marketing has become a bit of a messy middle.
Welcome to another episode of WFA's Better Marketing, and thank you to Meta for supporting us, particularly on a day when we're going to be talking to one of their competitors. Great privilege to welcome Dan Taylor, VP of Global Ads at Google. He's actually worked at Google for over 20 years, so he would have been a man talking about the very early days of search, but that's not what he's talking about now. Welcome, Dan. Fantastic to have you join us on the Better Marketing podcast, and I think in terms of Google, you're what we describe as a veteran, 20 years plus. I think you've been there.
Yeah, just about 20 years. I wouldn't consider myself a founding father, but I'm probably what you call a village elder at this point.
A village elder, I love it. And obviously, as I've looked back over the archive, what you've seen change in those times is astonishing. So, if we look at this, the intersection of the platform itself, brands and agencies, hit the highlights of the evolution and what you've seen and where you think we are today.
Well, I'd say the top thing that I'm seeing today that is the shift of measurement from a reporting tool when I started at Google to today, it's really an engine for driving growth. Now, I joined Google from what I'd call traditional media, right, broadcast. And so I was really excited by the opportunity to start solving that half of my advertising is wasted, but I don't know which half, right? That statement famously attributed to Wanamaker, right? So in the early days, our conversations with agencies and brands was really focused on proxy metrics. And I was thrilled to have metrics, impressions and clicks. And that started to evolve closer to what advertisers actually wanted to know. Did people see my ad? Did it deliver a return on my ad spend? And so as technology started to change rapidly, and AI more recently, right? Both predictive and generative AI is really helping marketers move at the speed of the customer. And so the relationship and how that's changed with platforms and marketers and agencies has moved towards a marketer's first party data. And so with AI-powered advertising and automation powering buying and bidding and sometimes even creative decisions, advertisers have really doubled down on measurement to steer their advertising to get the outcomes they want.
Yeah, and yet there is a school of thought, Seth Godin particularly vocal on this, that actually if you want to get the right metrics, don't pay any attention to any metric given to you by a platform. I mean, I'm sure you've heard that, but what's your response to that?
Well, I think in general, there's a combination of an advertiser knows best what is driving their real world outcomes. And so I'll give you an example. Paylocity, they're an HR software company, and they're historically focused on driving lead volume, right? And so we can generate all the leads in the world through our advertising campaigns, but we don't see which of their leads are turning into customers in their CRM system. And so, they used Data Manager to send back to Google which of those leads were actually turning into high value customers or qualified prospects for them. And that helped them increase their conversion value by 62%. So it's a combination of we can optimize towards any signal that you give us, but you've got the right signals.
Okay, great answer. Thank you for that. And obviously, as we get deeper into the AI world, there are those that say AI will see the end of human beings being necessary as in the marketing sphere. I'm not one of those, I hasten to add. We'll come back to that. But how are you seeing that?
Top CMOs are using AI today to minimize the mundane, as one CMO put it. They're taking execution of their marketing strategies from weeks to hours so teams can focus on higher impact work. So I'm definitely in that camp. So take creative. When every business, large and small, has the creative power of a Hollywood studio in their pocket, understanding your customer, and having marketers on staff with great ideas matters more than ever. And so, yeah, you should be spending more time there. So finding opportunities to improve execution and automate workflows is really common among every customer that I talk to. So take someone like Event Ticket Center, which is a ticket marketplace. They were using stock imagery for their campaigns, but it was time consuming and expensive. They used AI to text to image prompts, and they sped up their creative production by 5x. Now, bigger enterprises and agencies are talking to us about Google Marketing Platform solutions to kind of take this even further. How do they connect that first-party data I was talking about, their marketing mix models, their creative assets, and start to build planning, buying, and optimization into their media practice? One marketer told me, he goes, I don't think I'm going to be replaced by AI, but I'm pretty sure I could be replaced by a marketer that's using AI better than I am.
Yeah. And what are the best use cases you're seeing? I mean, let's celebrate some successes, and perhaps in contrast, where are you seeing people not getting it right? And we always do the no names rule on that one, of course.
Well, I think broadly speaking, you're not getting the best of Google or keeping pace with consumers if you're not using AI-powered advertising. So broadly speaking, we did a study with Boston Consulting Group. And so marketers that have deeply integrated AI tools into their marketing practice are reporting 60% greater revenue growth than their peers who are just getting started. So there's a pretty big cost of being a laggard. And so that's why our focus continues to be on AI-powered innovations, ensuring customers are embracing kind of the essentials. And these are things like data strength, bringing that first-party data into Google systems to tell us where to steer AI, capitalizing on things like Asset Studio or new generative AI tools, and some of these new expansionary opportunities in AI-powered surfaces as people are spending time in things like AI mode and AI overviews and some of these new experiences that have really changed the nature of how people are searching and engaging with technology. That's a pretty exciting space right now.
And what about I was looking at the Super Bowl as an event where there were kind of interesting things, a reminder of how powerful live events are as an advertising medium, a lot of people piling in there, and an awful lot of work produced by AI, start to finish. Oliver had a particular example, and there were other ones, but probably the first time we've seen this technology in good creative action as well. What did you make of that?
In terms of the Super Bowl creative?
Yeah.
Well, I think that, look, creative, the opportunity to, as I mentioned a moment ago, put the tools in the hands of creators, big and small, really puts a lot of opportunity in the hands of the most creative minds in the world. And so where I think this is really fascinating is, yes, we've created a lot of opportunities in Google Asset Studio, in Google Ads. But where I think this really comes home to roost in a lot of ways is on YouTube. And so, for example, we've created many tools for our content creators to create, Hollywood or Bollywood style production value in their home studios, and to be able to create these amazing content. And so what I'm really finding is that great content and the barrier for producing it at amazing scale and amazing quality has really been great to see. And so I'm excited about the ability to amplify great ideas without being limited by a budget.
And Dan, one of the things, let me make sure I follow my own rule here. A CEO of one of the largest companies in the world has recently been talking about they have no need anymore for brand building marketing, but they can do the whole thing via creators and using the creative community. And bearing in mind they own some of the world's most powerful brands, that's a pretty bold statement. Are you seeing that as a trend? Do you think you can build brands through creators, through your tools?
Building brands through our tools. So I think, again, it comes back down to marketers. There still needs to be a human with a great idea utilizing tools to amplify and scale those great ideas. And so it's a bit of a garbage in, garbage out situation. And so AI creates the ability to scale great ideas. And so how I think about it is the concepts of marketing and the traditional tenets of marketing, knowing your customer, finding the right way to match your products and services to the needs of that customer, building a great idea and message that resonates, and then using these new tools to deliver and amplify that message. That's the piece that's really changing right now. And so, yes, I think you can use those tools to really amplify your brand. Can those tools do it without human intervention? No, I don't think so.
Good. But, there used to be this notion, and obviously it was creative agencies that spouted this, that a bit like a tailor, what you want if you're a client is you want three things. You want it cheaper, better, and faster. And what they used to say is pick any two you like because you can only have two of them.
Yeah, my brother's a home improvement contractor. He loves that phrase. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think we're now in a world where you can get all three, and are you seeing all three?
It's an interesting framing. I think you have to invest in all of those areas. I think the fast and the affordable is really where, and the good, all of those things can happen. But in terms of like the creative ideas and the strategic concepts behind them are still very much in the marketer's domain. And I don't see that at this stage being replaced by AI.
Brilliant. No, I would agree with that. And I think, when we talk to CMOs around the world, one of them famously talked about seeing AI as the back office and the front office is still human. It's still human creativity, human connection enabled by the tech. But you can see the appeal of the faster, better, cheaper thing. And back to the Oliver ad they did for Super Bowl, it was done in 3 weeks, start to finish, and for a very low budget with an amazingly good impact. So there are plenty of case studies out there. But, I believe in the power of creativity and the power of human creativity enabled by the tech. I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're seeing as well. And so our own chief marketing officer, Lorraine, tends to think about this idea of concept in the morning and shipping in the afternoon. Now, we don't always do it that rapidly, but that is the way that we like to think about how we might be able to use AI to accelerate great ideas faster.
Yeah, and I think the other, can we touch on search? I mean, obviously, Google was built off the basis of revolution around search, and that continues. And I love something you said recently, which is people are now searching like your mum. Can you fill that out, because it was a beautiful way of expressing it, and I like the humanity of it too. But I kind of know what you mean. But can you unpack that for us?
Yeah. So we're in an expansionary moment for search and for ads, and this is really creating new opportunities for marketers. And so what I meant by that is that AI has really raised people's expectations for what search can do. And so it's improving the answers that we can provide at the same time, including when ads are the best answers. And so people are coming to Google to ask completely new questions, longer, more complex questions, 2 to 3 times longer than we typically have seen before, even visual, right? People are taking pictures of things to search. And those are things that weren't even possible to respond to just a couple of years ago. So kind of moving from using keywordese to a more conversational experience, the way you talk to a person, right? And so we see already over 5 trillion searches a year on Google, but overall queries, including commercial queries, are growing year over year. And that's largely been driven by our AI investments in search and the expectations of consumers that like, oh, I can actually go search for that. These are the types of questions I hadn't thought I could go to search to ask for. And so new experiences like AI overviews and AI mode really adapt to embrace this shift in consumer behavior.
And obviously you're VP of advertising. So what's the commercial model as this change happens? I mean, how are you going to monetize that behavioral change?
Yeah, for sure. So these new AI-powered experiences are creating great opportunities for marketers to get discovered in new ways and in different parts of the consumer journey. And so the two areas that I mentioned, AI overviews are a AI-generated snapshot that show up in search results. Typically when there's not one single answer, right, or when links out to the web aren't the only answer that we can provide. And both in those examples and in AI mode, our ad system can match ads not just to what the person searched for, but also to the context of the answer. This has been a bit of an aha moment for our advertisers. And so in addition to advertisers being able to tap into these longer and more complex queries, they're able to tap into the context of the AI overviews and the AI responses and show relevant ads in those contexts. And so what it's done is it's really unlocked billions of new queries for advertisers. And so let me give you an example. Lufthansa Group, they used a new advertising feature that we launched to take advantage of this consumer behavior called AI Max to capture these more complex queries, and it drove a 16% increase in their conversion rate and a 24% boost in return on ad spend. And how did that happen? Basically, they were not tapping into the new ways that people were searching. Their keyword campaigns were kind of set in a year's prior way that consumers were searching and not adapted to the way that people were searching today. And so it was a great way for advertisers to be nimble to the new ways people are searching.
And are you seeing people who are taking that kind of advantage, accelerating away from the competition, the laggards? And let's talk about some best practice. What's happening to the people who are being slow to adopt these tools, or slower?
Yeah, I think I talked a little bit about that. I don't have specific stats on this, but the rate at which our advertisers are adopting these new AI-powered tools has been great. And so clearly across our industry, saying AI has been a buzzword would be an understatement. And so what advertisers are most interested in when I meet with them is, how do we take advantage of the opportunity in these new AI-powered experiences? And the conversation, first and foremost in search, is, well, are you taking advantage and are your campaigns adaptable to the new ways that people are searching? And in many cases, they're not. And so these are places where AI Max for search campaigns, which we launched less than a year ago and is our most successful product in over a decade. Performance Max, which now has over 1 million advertisers. Asset Studio, which is now has over 2 million users. And so we have advertisers are using these quite heavily, and they're seeing outsized performance gains.
And Dan, you yourself, having been at this for 20 years, how do you keep pace with the changes, and how closely do you work with the folk driving the change?
Well, I'll tell you, the pace and intensity of innovation, we launched a decade's worth of innovation across Google in the last 12 months. I just think about something like ads quality, where we are able, through Gemini, to better understand what people are searching for and match it to the products and services that our advertisers have. We have been launching ads quality improvements at a rate of about once a month for the past 2 years, and that has improved our ability to reduce irrelevant ads by 40%. And so how I keep pace with that is to just every morning take a look and see what's new. And so one of the things I tell my teams is, as you're working with these new AI tools and systems, every couple of weeks, test the edges of what's possible and see if the edge has moved. And so that's really how we encourage a nature of experimentation. And so I think the best CMOs and the best leaders inside of our company recognize that AI is really a leadership challenge more than a technology challenge.
Yeah, and in terms of that, can we talk a little bit here about a dangerous subject always, which is regulation? So in this space there hasn't been a great deal of regulation. I'll never forget, last year when we had the Global Marketer Week in Brussels, and the fabulous Asmita Dubai was talking on behalf of L'Oreal. And one of the things she said is they had decided to never use AI generated images, on their Instagram feed when they were testing new products, and got a spontaneous round of applause. And then there was a whole sidebar thing with people going, actually, if the AI is generating imagery, shouldn't we know that they're generating? I mean, how do you see that? I mean, what's the internal dialogue around that? Any concerns, or seeing any difficulties with the regulators? Because the world is not even when it comes to this as well.
Well, I think we're very opinionated on this front in a couple of ways. First of all, I think it was back in 2018 or so, we established a set of AI principles publicly that also guide a lot of our decision making internally around how we want to deploy AI. And mostly that's around making sure that we are bold in our innovation, but responsible in our execution, and making sure that we are scientifically excellent in how we roll out these models. And so we feel really strongly about that. And then on the regulatory side, I think it is a really important space. It's to regulate. It's also really fastly moving. And so it's really important to regulate it well. And so when I heard you say a moment ago, we will never, I think it's really important to have a regulatory framework that is nimble and adaptable for a technology that is evolving so quickly that by the time you write it, it may very well be out of date. And so I think really focusing in on a set of principles when the technologies themselves will evolve over time is critically important there. And that's the kind of dialogue we're having with public policy and key opinion formers.
And internally, are you good at holding each other to account on the principles? Because I think it depends on that as well, the company behaving in the right way.
Oh, I would say absolutely that's the case. I think one of the things that we know to be true is that, and it's one of the things that I've come to really enjoy and has kept me here for 20 years, is that we deploy our AI the same way that we've deployed all of our consumer and advertising services over the years, which is, are we benefiting and providing information that is useful and helpful to the consumer, to the advertiser? We know it's an incredibly competitive landscape. Users are one click away, advertisers are one platform away. And so if we're not really focusing on providing that consumer and business benefit with deployment of these technologies, then there's always somebody right behind us or right ahead of us that can do that just as well. And so those principles keep us honest just as well as the competitive environment does.
Yeah, because, I started in a business that was all about hearts and minds. And, people talk about it still being about hearts, but now it's hearts and machines. And unless you know how the algorithm's working, and unless you can make it work for you, the more we get automated, the more difficult it's going to be. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because again, I'm sure there's an internal dialogue about, in the end, you could automate everything, but you want to make sure you're doing it the right way for society at large.
Well, taking a step back, we've been on this AI journey with customers for over a decade, right? Advertisers have been using automation in our ads products to optimize business goals, from bidding to profit, or buying across inventory types with campaigns going all the way back to app campaigns. And so while AI and generative AI in particular is a big shift, it isn't one that happened overnight. But throughout, to your point, marketers have had a critical role to play both in steering the AI, and they've also been, quite demanding, rightfully so. I want to understand how predictive, analytical, generative AI is making decisions. And so that's why we've also prioritized transparency in reporting, being able to pull insights out of that. And so again, going back to the start of our conversation, coming from traditional media, one of the benefits of working in digital is you learn from your working media, and that informs your overall strategy. And we see that as an important part of ongoing feedback loops as we continue to innovate in AI-powered advertising. And we don't see it as a set it and forget it strategy, and I don't think marketers do either.
No, that's good. And in terms of marketers that are doing this well, what can other marketers learn from what they're up to at the moment? If you were coaching the CMO of today who was not necessarily making use of all these tools, where would you focus?
I would say when a CMO has really cracked this, they're focusing on reducing the time spent on execution and scaling and shifting more of their resourcing into strategy and creative. And one of the things that and I know I feel like a little bit of a broken record here, getting their first party data and their measurement practice really sharp, because in the end, that is what's going to steer these new AI powered tools, whether it's your marketing mix model, whether it's your creative strategy or more. That's what's going to steer your AI powered tools to make the right decisions when you're not having your hands on the keyboard.
As marketing itself changes and the models that people grew up with change, how do you see that at Google? I mean, we've talked about creators here. We've talked about the tools to enable connection. We've talked about the data and first party data in particular. I mean, how are you helping coach people on, let's call it the new marketing, or it's certainly the evolving marketing?
Yeah, the way that we talk about it is that the traditional funnel, if you will, is not fit for purpose with the reality of how today's consumer is. And so, today's consumer is searching, they're streaming, they're scrolling, they're shopping. Sometimes they're doing 2, 3, or 4 of those at the same time. And so really marketing has become a bit of a messy middle of a consumer decides that they're interested in something, and then the purchase or the decision happens. And so all of that messy middle is the places where you need to be. And so we're advising marketers to make sure, in order to move at the speed of the consumer and show up in the moments that matter, it's about having that right data foundation that we talked about, maybe ad nauseum at this point. Number 2, it's about having the right creative assets to pull from at the right moment. So if you're reaching someone in a social environment, or you're reaching someone who is searching in an exploratory fashion and is ready to discover new brands, or if you're at a point where someone is solely price shopping, you have the ability for your product or your service to be there in that moment with the right message. And so advertisers that are adapting the quickest to this, are thinking about, how do I be there in those moments versus planning for stages or planning for channels or planning in silos. And I think AI really helps with that. Everything from the planning process and in marketing mix models down to the execution with campaigns like Performance Max.
It is amazing, though, isn't it? Because keeping up with the changes and exploiting them is a challenge for every marketer, I imagine. But when you look at the very best marketers out there, what can the rest learn? What are they doing? How do you work with them? How would you coach others to get the best out of your tools?
I would say there's 2 things that I see the best marketers doing today. As AI-powered campaigns have really taken off, I've shifted a lot of my own focus on data, measurement, and the platforms that power AI towards the outcomes that marketers really want. And so I see CMOs similarly. They're spending more time modernizing their measurement practice. So today, you're using attribution for day-to-day optimization. You're using incrementality testing to determine if you're spending the right amount. And then you're using marketing mix models to determine budget allocation across your partners. And so this data is a really big part of making sure AI is delivering on business results. I don't see enough marketers investing in that part of the equation. The second piece, and it's related, is they're partnering with the CFO or the purse string holder to reframe marketing as a growth engine. And what I mean by that is when marketing leaders stop treating measurement and their reporting back to finance as a report card on how did I spend this money, and they start using it as an offensive growth play, they can start to accurately predict future returns. And so focusing on outcomes helps move the conversation from how much can we spend next year to how much growth can marketing drive. And that's really been a great way that we've been working with customers over the past couple of years to kind of reframe that conversation.
And if we if we look back at this decade in the future, what do you think will separate the best marketeers from the average ones?
The ones that don't wait. I think AI has created an expansionary moment for the whole industry, and it's happening right now. And I look back to other big shifts in our industry, and slow roll is typically a bad look in retrospect, right? Again, coming to Google to convince agencies that search engine marketing mattered, talking to TV buyers about the power of YouTube and online video, literally pleading with advertisers to advertise on mobile. So historically, his fortune has favored those that lead the way, and this is another one of those moments.
Fantastic. Dan, that's a good juncture to say thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. Most precious thing in anybody's day is good use of their time, great use of our time, and we really appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.
Great. Thank you so much, David.
Another great episode, really enjoyable chat with Dan there, and actually a masterclass of what you can do in the world of AI with Google to make your marketing better. And that is, after all, the aim of this podcast. Take care until the next time. Bye.